Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is something called methods. Okay? Methods. And we're going to take a look at a little introduction to methods. If you did the code listings, I'm thinking that you're going to have a pretty good idea of what a method is. Now, for a method, what we're going to do is say, all right, I have this big program I want to write. And there's a certain block of code that I want Mohammed to write. So I'm going to send him off to do a specific task, to do a block of code. It might only be 5 lines, okay? And that might be something along the lines of, no, Mohammed, you don't have to do this, by the way. This is just me, just an example. I may say, I want him to write the lines of code that would display this awesome welcome message in a message box, okay? And then I might say, well, Chow Ping, I want you to go ask the user to enter a number and make sure that the number is between 1 and 50 and it's all good. And then I might say to Zara, I want you to write a block of code that takes that number and does 9 different things to it. It's like one of those number guessing games, okay? And I'd say go. And each of you are going to write a small block of code to do a specific task. Well, that's what the advantages of having these things called methods. It's taking a big program and breaking it down into smaller blocks of code, smaller tasks that are a lot easier to manage and could possibly be reused, okay? Like I may ask you to write a block of code that sorts numbers. You go, wow, how do I do that? Well, that's coming up, but how do I write a block of code to sort numbers? Well, once that's done, in my next program, I might say, hey, I'd like to go copy that and paste it into my new program. And I may use that in another program. So I could keep copying and pasting and reusing these little small blocks of code. Okay, this is a hierarchy method, and that means I'm going to divide and conquer, right? I took the program, I'm now the main part of the program, and I'm saying, hey, go do this, the block of code Muhammad wrote. Go do this, the block of code Chao Peng wrote. Go do this, the block of code Zara wrote. Okay, and each of those blocks of code, again, are called methods. Yes, Amy? Amy,
that was fast.
It was?
That was fast. Yeah.
It's good I recorded it. Go
yes. My question is, I hear what you're saying about copying and pasting, but I'm wondering how that would it be more difficult than when you see something on the test, and since you're kind of not retyping, being able to remember. You know what I'm saying?
Not exactly. I think.
All right. So copying and pasting, that definitely makes things a whole lot faster, and
Yes.
you get things more accurate, you know,
Right.
because you're copying and pasting.
Mhm.
But in terms of committing to memory for, say, the exam, or if you're in a situation where you don't have access to your codes that you could copy and paste.
Right. Then you just have to rewrite them is what would happen. You know,
Right. Then you.
Yeah, it's one of those down the road as a programmer, you're going to start to see more and more where these are usable. You know, we just took an overview from baby steps to awesomeness in 1 minute and 24 seconds. Now we need to break it. So we looked at the whole. Now we need to break it down and start looking at the pieces.
Right.
And we put it all back together at the whole at the end. That's
right.
An unknown common teaching strategy. Whole part whole.
Okay. I was just wondering about ways to commit to memory for better recognition on the exam. That was it.
Right, I understand. Chad has a question. Are methods essentially functions? In Java, we call them methods. In C++, we call them functions. I think in Visual Basic, which I haven't taught in about 10 years, we call them procedures. Or maybe that was Pascal, we called them procedures. So they all have these same types of names. So yeah, when we come to this class, I may accidentally call them functions, which I mean methods. And when you take C++, I may reverse that. Okay, so there are two types that we're going to work with, two types of method. The first one is called a void method. And this one, all it does is whatever, like when I asked Mohammed to give me something that does a nice message box with a whole bunch of, hey, welcome to this program. The purpose of this program is for the user to calculate two roots given the ABC of a quadratic, and they're usually, oh, I know exactly what this program does instead of enter AB. But that's all it is. It's just a single message, okay? The second type of a method is one that will actually return a single value. We call it a value returning method. Darn, what if I want to do 2 values or 3 values? That's down the road. We're still taking baby steps. Okay, but for right now, we're going to talk about the two types, a void method and a value returning method. All right, so once we start using these methods, what we have in our main is really simple. Like I said a moment ago, I'm the boss. I'm saying, Mohammed, go do this. Chow Peng, go do this. Zara, go do that, right? And I'm going to call your blocks of code when I need them. So in the main, it should look a whole lot simpler. Hopefully a lot of you today will at least take a look at assignment 5.1, okay, even though it's not due for a while because we have a test on Wednesday on chapters 3 and 4. Other things you might see in the main is a loop. You might see decisions, if statements. If this is true, then go call that method, else go call that method. But we want to try to clean the main up from here on out and let little pieces do the work instead of everything being located in the main. Okay, so let's see, what do we have? For example, a void method. Okay. The location of all of my methods will be after my main. So I have my first brace, my main, and a brace, and then I start listing all of my methods. So just a note there. What does a void method look like? A void method is always going to have this public static void. Okay, and that's the key word. You don't need to worry about public. You don't need to worry about static. You need to worry about void. Now, why? Void says I'm not going to return anything. Okay. Then I have my method name, display, and a set of parentheses. Now, it's optional whether I have something in those parentheses or not, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The body of my method starts with a left brace and ends with a right brace. And you saw an example of this in code listing 5.1. And all it's going to do is display some messages, the charge that I had given Mohammed. Okay? So it's public static void and then my method name. Now, going along with that code listing 5.1, up in the main, we call the method. Now, in order to call a void method, it just sits on the line. We just say, hey, display. And what we do is we send over an argument. And in this case, inside of my parentheses, I have a 5. Inside of this display, I have a variable x. Here I call display x plus 5. I have an expression. So when I get ready and I include arguments, I'm passing values over, okay? They can be a constant, they can be a variable, they can be an expression like display x plus 5. Now those guys are called arguments, and if I'm sending a value over in my heading, I have to catch it. Okay, so this display 5 has 5 flying through the air. And now when I get down to public static void display, I'm receiving this 5. And this is where I have my parameter list. Okay, a 5 is flying through the air. It's a single thing. I already know its data type is int. So in my parentheses, I have int num. So that 5 now lands inside of this num. Okay, this num right here is called a local variable. because as soon as I hit that right brace to end the body of this little method, I almost called it a function, to end this method, num is erased from memory. It's gone. It's out of here. It's history. Okay? It's called a local variable. Inside the body of this method, I might say int y. That's another local variable. Again, when I leave the scope, when I leave the scope of this method, when I hit that right brace at the end, all of my local variables are forgotten. The one that was the parameter and the one int y that I declared inside the body. Okay, so when I get ready and I start working, and you saw an example of that in code listing 5. When I get ready and say, hey, I may not have any arguments, I may have several arguments. One of the things that I have to keep in mind is when it comes to arguments and parameters, I have to have the same number of each. So if I get ready and call a method display and I have 3 arguments, I better be have a parameter list with 3 variables in it. You need to keep them in the same order, and you need to make sure they're the same data type. And as you see in my example display, I'm calling a new display. This time I have 3 arguments, 6, 4.2, hi mom. Then when I get down to my method heading, I say public static void. Here's display. My first local variable int num1 will get the value of the 6, which was my first argument. Double num2 will get the value of 4.2, which was my second argument. And my third local variable in my parameter list is string str, and str would get the value of hi mom. So I can pass those values into my method. Okay? Void method. Arguments, parameters. What do you got? Questions?
So the method, they're just like functions, right? Just calling the display value.
Yes.
The value inside the display.
Yep.
Okay, so just
Yep.
functions.
So up in the main, you're going to see a line that looks like this. Display 6, 4.2, hi mom. Semicolon at the end. That'll be something in the main. At that point, the program will jump down to the method and do what's in the body of the method. And I will pass those 3 values into the method.
Okay.
All right. More notes. When I pass a value in, and it stores it in a variable. So if I go back to this 6, and I stored it in num1 in my parameter list, and the first thing I said in num1, let me go back up here, excuse me. I'll make this a little clear. Here I have display x. Okay, I only had a single argument in our earlier example. So x goes and gets stored in num1. And what if in down here I now said num plus plus. So what's the value now of num? Well, 5 was the argument. It came down to the parameter list and stored 5 in num. Now num becomes 6. So when I go back up to the program, what's the value of x going to be? It's going to stay as 5. Okay? Just because I linked it up with num and I changed num doesn't mean it reciprocates back. So x is going to retain its original value. So this is called passing by value. It doesn't know where it is in memory, where it's located, can't go there and change it. All it knows is the value of x is flying through the air. So in the book in code listing 516, it says we are passing by value, okay? There's a little note, strings are immutable, which means they won't change either. And we'll get into a much deeper conversation about that later, because remember, a string variable is a memory address. And that's a little bit deeper conversation we don't need to have right now. Notes about local variables, again, declared in a method, either in a parameter list or locally. It's the scope in the method. Everything's gone when I leave the method. The local variable values are gone. If I call the method again, they get reset. Okay. Here's an interesting one, to me at least. They can have the same name as the variable. So if I said display X, down in my parameter list, I could have a new variable called X. It's totally different than the X up above. It just happens to have the same value. And that's something that you took a look at in code listing 5.8. Okay, so we took a look at void methods. We talked about the arguments and we talked about the parameter list. And now we need to jump to our second type of method, which is a value returning method. So now you're going to see a little different usage in the main. In the void method, we just said display, and then whatever our arguments were. Now, if I have a value returning method, that means a value is being returned and I have to do something with it. For example, I have to save it. And here's what I got. Total equals sum, which is a method name, 4, 6. So I'm going to call the method sum. It's going to have the arguments 4 and 6 going into that method. So let's take a look at what I have. This time I know I'm returning a value. I'm going to store it in total, and total better be an int because I say public static int. Earlier for a void method, it was void, but now it's an int. The method name is sum followed by 2 parameters because I had 2 arguments, 4 and 6. My parameters int num1 and int num2. Another name for a parameter list is its signature. You'll hear that more and more down the road. This is the signature of it, okay? Inside the body, I say int result. Result equals num1 plus num2. Now I have a return statement. So right now, num1 has the value of 4. Num2 has the value of 6. I add those and store 10 in result. I return result, which had the value of 10. It flies back up into the main and stores it in total. Questions? And you did have a code listing 5.9 that did something quite similar to that. So we've already talked about arguments. We've already talked about the parameter list or its signature. The difference is I'm going to have, instead of public static void, I'm going to have public static int. And when I do that, I need to return an int, which will take it back to the main and store it in the line in which it was called. Okay, so again, value returnings are on a line that does something with the value being returned. Void, like display, was on a line all by itself. Questions? 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 Okay. So now I want to take a look at getting started with a program that's going to ask the user for the radius. It's now going to use that and calculate the area. It's going to use that radius and calculate the volume. And then I know I want to display everything. So I just created 4 thoughts. I want to get the radius. I want to be able to calculate the area and find out what it is. I want to be able to calculate the volume and find out what it is. And I want to be able to display everything. So I went and I wrote this up as 4 methods, okay? First one's called get radius. Second one is called calc area. Third one is calc volume. And finally, display. Got my 4 thoughts down. You notice how I'm writing them. Get, lowercase get, then capital R, A-I-D. So that second word and any other word after that would be capitalized. That's a common naming scheme for methods in computer programming, to write them like that. First word's lowercase, starts with a lowercase. Second word, radius, starts with a capital R. All right, so let's start. I'm going to add a little bit more to these. And this is what your main is going to look like. Get radius. Will I be passing anything in to get radius? Well, the answer is going to be no. Am I going to be returning something? Yeah, I'm going to return something called rad. And I'm thinking for my radius in my declaration, I should make rad a double. Okay, so I'm starting to put my program together. I'm doing a little planning before I just start typing. I'm going to get the radius. That's going to be a method that says, hey, please enter a value for the radius. This program's really cool. We love this class, whatever, whatever. They're going to input a value. You're going to return it. It's going to store it in rad. My next method call, calc area. In order to calculate the area, do I need something?
We need radius.
Yeah, I'm going to need rad. So I want to pass rad in. That's going to be my argument. And when I calculate, I'm going to return it. So now I need to create a second variable up in my declaration section called area, because I want to store that in area. So my first two methods are going to be value returning. Calculate the volume. Again, this is for a circle, so it's the 4/3 pi r cubed, something like that. I'm going to have to pass in the rad again, and I'm going to return it and store it in vol. So my line is vol equals calc volume, parentheses, rad, parentheses. So that's a third variable I had to declare. Finally, I want to display everything. Will I be returning anything when I display? I heard a grunt, so I'll take that grunt as a no, okay? So I don't need something equals display. I just need display on a line by itself. And what am I going to pass in? Well, I'm going to pass in the rad so I can display. Here's the radius. I'm going to pass in area so I can display here is the area of the circle. And I'm also going to pass in vol so I can say here's the volume of the sphere. So what do I have? 4 methods. The first one, rad equals get radius, had no arguments going in, so empty parentheses. It's a value returning, I'm storing it in rad. The second one, calc area, I'm passing rad over because I need that to do the area, and I'm going to return what the area actually is. Same thing for volume. Finally, I hit a void method called display, and this has 3 arguments, rad, area, and volume being sent over. Questions?